What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be discussing the box office for this weekend, which saw two new films come into the marketplace 28 years later and Elio, both of which underperformed. Now, I know what you might be saying, right? The projections for 28 years later had it around 28 to 30 million already, and it landed at that $30 million mark. However, this thing could have gone so much higher, and it would have gone so much higher. I truly believe it would have gone so much higher had the reviews not been so bad. When the critic score came out and it was in like the 95 range, I think it actually started out with 100%, and I was like, oh boy, we could be looking at a $50 million weekend from 28 years later easily. If the audience scores anything like that critic score, we're in for a massive weekend from 28 years later. And the audience score came out to 68%, which was horrible. Me and my dad got to go see 28 years later. He liked it. I hated it. I really did. I did not like the film at all. It was very disappointing all the way around. And, you know, I just felt like it was very... it was different from the first 28 days and 28 weeks, which I really liked those films. But this one was just not nearly as good at all. But you can go watch our full review if you want to get all the details on that. But apparently the audience score definitely hurt its box office because it did open to only 30 million. This thing could have easily done 40 million had it been kinder with the audience. You know, if the audience score is a little bit higher, then this thing could have easily gotten to 40 million. But here we are with it at 30 million, and Elio is just an absolute disaster. It's Pixar's lowest opening ever for the company at only $21 million. Which is disastrous. That's disastrous. And of course, it is an original film, which obviously calls that all into question again of, you know, original films. Are they dying? Yes, they are dying. And I think this has a lot to do, you know, because we saw, you know, DreamWorks put out an original animation, The Wild Robot, that came out last year that did 37 million, I believe. That's way higher than this. Right, so clearly, you know, original films, they can still do well. Look no further than Sinners. Original animation, though, is a lot tougher, especially Pixar, okay? Because Pixar has really hurt its trust with the audience and its reputation over the last few years, with a lot of what they've done. They've disappointed the audience over and over again. And I know you might be saying, really, only two films really disappointed the audience, and that was Lightyear and Turning Red, right? Because like the last film before that was Luca, which was well received, Soul, which is, in my opinion, one of the best Pixar films, but very well received films up until Lightyear and then Turning Red. Both were awful. And so that divided the audience. But the problem is here that the audience really doesn't, the average person does not care to know the difference between Pixar and Disney. And so Disney has also had their fair share of problems, right? Like Wish, which opened to 19 million. That opened under Elio. And so that's even worse. And then Strange World came out, and that was not well received. So it's both Disney and Pixar animations have been both just, like, they've tarnished their reputation with the audience. And since people are like, well, Pixar, Disney, basically the same thing, they don't show up for either now. And so they've both completely ruined their reputations with the audience. And that is where you're getting these numbers that are just like, nobody's going out to see this movie. And here's what's worse, is that the early projections for that Smurfs movie that's coming out that looks awful, okay, that Smurfs movie that's coming out is projected to do up to $25 million, which would be higher than Elio. Can you imagine if the Smurfs movie outgrosses Pixar on its opening weekend? That would be insane. I don't think that will happen. I think the Smurfs they're gonna go a lot lower. I think probably like 10 to 15. But the fact that it's even being projected to go higher than a Pixar film, like, that's unheard of, and that's ridiculous, right? And Elio is not a bad film. In fact, it is pretty well received by both critics and audiences. And it's not a bad film. It's a pretty good film. It's not Soul, it's not Coco, it's not Pixar at its best, but it's not a bad film. And so, I think that Pixar needs to start getting back to that. If they're going to make original movies, they've got to make them very interesting, right? You think about all the Pixar films of the past, like WALL-E, like Toy Story, like Monsters, Inc. What do they all have in common? They have really unique storylines and stories that draw people in. Elio, it's just like an alien space movie, and it had barely any marketing either. Like, they didn't really market this film a lot anyway, so that could have been another reason that it didn't do well. But it's also a very generic story, and it's very predictable in what's happening. It's just a classic alien movie, just with Pixar-style animation, and you're really not getting anything different than any other alien movie that you'd go see, but that's not what Pixar is. That's what makes Pixar Pixar. It's unique, right? You go in for a unique story. That's not what you're getting here. And so, the other Pixar film coming out next year, Hoppers, looks like it's going to be, just by the description, it seems like it's going to be a lot more unique of a story than Elio, and if done right, it could be an original hit for Pixar that Elio wasn't. And Elio could be that kind of confirmation that, even though Elio's not top tier Pixar, it's still not a bad film like Lightyear or Turning Red, so I think audiences will kind of give Pixar a bit of grace on it and say, you know what, when you compare it to these other films they've made, it's really good. And Inside Out 2 is also an incredible film. So you have back-to-back films that have not been bad, right? And even Elemental, which, Elemental, I honestly think is more well-received than Elio. So what you're looking at is like 3 Pixar films that have gone back-to-back to back that have not been bad. Right? So I think the more that you do that, it kind of builds the trust back in the audience, but you've got to come up with those unique storylines to get people back and, become the old Pixar that they were pre-COVID and even a little after COVID, right? So Elio, disastrous opening, but hopefully they can get back to it with Hoppers, which looks like a much better story, so we'll see how that one does. But 28 years later, How to Train Your Dragon, in its second weekend, did $37 million, which is pretty good. I think it dropped 57% is what it dropped. So really, this weekend was not that great. When you really start breaking it down, 28 years later could have done better. 28 years, it didn't underperform, it didn't do bad, but I think it underperformed what it could have done with better audience score, better word of mouth. Elio, just disastrous opening, and How to Train Your Dragon didn't overperform in its second weekend either. In fact, the projections were saying 40 million plus for How to Train Your Dragon, and it came in 3 million under that. So that's rough, So this weekend all around, not a great weekend. From really any movie. So if we head on over the top 10 now, you can see How to Train Your Dragon with $36.5 million, down 57%. It's up to $160 million domestically in weekend number 2. At number 2, we have 28 Years Later, which did $30 million. Elio, which did, and the numbers actually came in under with 20.8, so it didn't even get to 21, just awful. Number 4, we have Lilo and Stitch with 9.7, down 38%, which is a great hold. That film's up to $386 million domestically in weekend number 5. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning comes in at number 5 with $6.4 million, down 39%. That film's up to $178 million domestically. At number 6, we have Materialists, which did $5.8 million in weekend number 2, down 49%. It's up to $23 million in its domestic run. At number 7, we have Ballerina, John Wick Ballerina, which did $4.5 million, down 54% in weekend number 3. That film's up to $51 million, which again, just another really bad hold for Ballerina. It's not as bad as last week's hold. Last week was like 64% drop or something like that, and it already opened low. So just an awful drop all around for weekend 2 from Ballerina. But this weekend, again, the lower you get money-wise, right, like the less you make each weekend, the less the drop should be, right? Like if Ballerina opening to $20 million went down to $9 million, right, like that's probably, or $8 million, I think it ended up with like $8 million or so, which ended up being like a 62% drop, right? But once you get down this low, from like $8 million down, ideally you want to see drops under 50%, right? I mean, you could say that a 50% drop for any film is good unless it's making just a few $1,000,000 a weekend, then it's not good because it's dropping hard, right? So the less that you make each weekend, the lower you want to see that drop, like the higher the lower, like you want to see the percentage lower, but the drop higher, right? So just another not great at all drop for Ballerina. And again, we said this last weekend, but I said no sequel. There should not be any talks for a sequel for Ballerina until we see what it does on streaming. Because again, word of mouth for this thing is good, like really good. I like the film. My dad liked the film. Like it's a really, really solid film that I think stands on its own with the John Wick movies. But again, it's just not making a lot of money. I mean, it's a new character, right? So it's like a John Wick movie that's not starring John Wick. So, the audience didn't show up for it. And I think that a sequel to the film could do well if it does well on streaming, because you have to build an audience with it first. You don't, like, I wouldn't have expected Ballerina to come out and do $50 million opening weekend. Just because you put the John Wick name on it doesn't mean it's going to do that. It's still a new character. And people are a lot more, they're not as much like, let's go to the theater for everything now. They need like a reason to go and see the movie. And for Ballerina, the trailers were good, the movie's good, the word of mouth is good, but there's no real reason for people to go see this movie in the theater because they don't know the character. So they're a lot more like protective of what they go see and what they don't go see and what they would stream at home. So if this thing does really well on streaming, then I could see a sequel being made. But until you see those streaming numbers come in, I don't even think a sequel should be in the works or in talks at all. All right, at number 8, we have Karate Kid Legends with $2.3 million, down 55%. That film's up to $50 million on its domestic run. Number 9, we have Final Destination Bloodlines with $1.8 million, down 53%. That film's up to $134 million a weekend, number 6 domestically. And then at number 10, we have Kubira, if I'm saying that right, $1.7 million on the weekend. All right, so let's talk about next weekend. We have 2 films coming out. We have F1 and Megan 2.0. Now, these are 2 very different films, so you're kind of going to get that, we thought we were going to get it with Elio and 28 Years Later, though, so we might not get kind of that opposite audience kind of thing where they're counter-programming each other. However, there's a lot going on with both of these films. One film is going in a very upward trajectory, the other is going into a very downward trajectory. And F1 is the one going a lot higher with a lot of momentum right now, with some saying it could do 70 million, and then Megan is falling fast, with some people saying this thing might not even get to 20 million, which is horrible because the first Megan did 30 million on its opening weekend. And there's a lot of reasons, I think, for this. Some people are not fans of the action vibe that the trailer gives. They want the horror back to this franchise, and that's not what the trailer kind of gave, and so that might have been a turnoff for some people. But this is also one of those things where you're taking a January franchise, right? Megan is not the summer blockbuster franchise. The original came out in January, and it did really well in January with great marketing and a TikTok dance that went viral right before it came out, similar to what Wednesday did right before it came out, and then it blew up. And we've seen it before with Minecraft, that social media pushes films. When they click on social media, they go up big. And so that was what happened with Megan. It caught the TikTok fame, and then everybody went to go see the movie, right? And it was in January. Now, with Megan 2.0, I think that they thought, well, we have an audience now for this. So let's put it out in the middle of June, like at the very end of June, the literal peak of the summer movie season. Let's drop Megan 2.0. Horrible decision to release that film in the middle of June. This should have been a January film. It should have been very close to where the first one came out. You've built an audience there. That's what you're going to get. And making Megan 2 compete with How to Train Your Dragon, 28 years later, another horror film that came out right before it. And then you have F1, and then Jurassic World, Superman, Fantastic Four. Having to compete with all of that, being a smaller Blumhouse film, I don't know who decided that June was a good release date for Megan 2.0, but it was a horrible idea. Horrible idea. And I think it should never have even been considered to be put out in the middle of summer. This should have been a January movie, at least, maybe even February, March, but not in the middle of June. Like, you can't do that. That's not going to work. So, Megan 2.0, the pre-sales aren't looking good. I'm going to have to take this on the lower end. Now, I am going to go ahead and say it does get to 20 million. I'm going to say it gets around Elio, and I'm going to say 21.7 for Megan 2.0. Unfortunately, I think if this came out in January, it would have gone higher. I really do. I think with all the competition around it, it's not going to do that. I think if it had come out in January, I think it would have done 30. But right now, I think you're looking at about 21.7 unless something drastically changes, like the pre-sales drastically change or some kind of big marketing material happens that takes off. I mean, anything could happen. But it's not looking good at all for it. On the other hand, F1's pre-sales are skyrocketing, and the reviews are even more. F1 did something really crazy with its reviews. I've never seen anything like it. Usually when a movie first drops the review embargo, usually that means it comes out with a number, usually in the 80s. And then it will come down over the course of 24 hours because you get all the hype on the front end and then it kind of slows down. So if a film opens with the review embargo at about 85%, it's probably going to come down to about 80% to maybe even 78% in that range by the time it's all said and done. F1 did something completely different. Just completely flipped all of that. It had 78% when the review embargo dropped. And I was worried because I was like, that's not good. And if it's going to drop, then it could go below that 75%, which is that certified fresh rating, which you really want to get over. You really want to get over that certified fresh 75%, and it may have fallen below that. So I was worried about that. It is currently sitting at 89%. Okay, and it's continuing to go up. It's probably going to get to 90%. It is easily a certified fresh, and there has been one bad review that has come in since the review embargo dropped. That's insane. There have been tons of reviews that have come in, only one bad one since the review embargo dropped. And it was at 78%. It has climbed its way up to an 89, and it will get to 90 probably. And that's just crazy, because that means that it has gone up 11 and is going to go up probably end up 12% since the review embargo dropped. I've never seen that before. That's crazy. So the reviews are just continuing to go up. The pre-sales are continuing to go up. The hype is continuing to go up. This film is going to be huge. And this is tough. This is really tough because on one hand, I think that it is an original film. So I think it's hard for me to say this thing's going to do 70 million as an original film. I mean, Sinners just broke the record for the biggest original live action film opening with 48 million, right? So for another film to come in and do 70, like that's tough. Even though with that Top Gun Maverick marketing that they're doing with the director and the composer, it's working clearly, and the trailers are getting a lot of buzz. And so it's hard for me to say it's going to do 70, but on the other hand, it feels too big to do 50. So I'm going to kind of take it in the middle, and I'm going to say 67.5 is what I think that F1 is going to open to. It could sway in either direction, but I'm just going to kind of take it in that middle where I think it could likely land. So, if you guys like this video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and comment down below what you guys think F1 and Megan 2.0 will open to, and I will see you guys next time.